Howdy, partners. Welcome back to Reaper and the Scribe. This is Bev coming to you from Hamtopia. It is the 1st of July. Alright, we're on chapter 65. So without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 65. Dixie and Paul Johnson found themselves lying on the pure white sands of a tropical paradise. They both sat up and looked around the place. A more beautiful, idyllic part of the world could not exist. Paul Johnson looked at Dixie and said, "Have you ever seen a sky so blue?" "Only for other people," answered Dixie. "Come on, let's explore," urged Paul. They both rose and started walking along the sand. To the side of the beach was a luxurious house that begged to be investigated. Paul slid the large glass door open effortlessly, and they both entered. Dixie sunk into one of the couches. As soon as she did, an elemental appeared with a bottle of Burl and Croft Brut champagne. "Wow, just look at that. That stuff's about 1,500 pounds a bottle," gasped Johnson. "How do you know that? I thought you were a beer man," said Dixie. "Oh, I am. The bubbles of champagne get right up my nose. I was attending a burglary investigation with Chief Inspector Thompson once, and a case of that particular sparkling wine had been reported stolen. I couldn't believe it when the woman whose wine it was told me its value." "Come, sit next to me. We have 3 days of pampering ahead of us, and I, for one, am going to enjoy it," she invited. "Me too," said Paul Johnson, joining her on the couch. In the other realm, Sarah sat at the side of Gavin Jackson, holding his hand, when Atkinson walked in the room. "It's no use trying to contact him, Sarah. I have made it so that the only contact with him must pass through me, and that's how it must stay." "Why have you done that?" she asked. "The reason I am doing that is if anyone is trying to connect with him, they have to do it through me, thus giving away their position and who they are." "I see," said Sarah. "He knows of the situation, but most of all he knows he is safe here. He is missing on the plane of existence, so I need you to smooth things over back there until we get this problem sorted. We don't want Gavin disappearing now as well as Dixie, do we?" "I understand. Although it will be hard to not be sad back there." "No, it won't, Sarah. You will be your usual self, because as far as anyone is concerned, you have him at home with the flu. Whenever you are in that realm, you have a choice between the unbested warrior that you are or the scatterbrained, annoying little slab girl. When you return there, you can hardly parade around with a pair of wings, wearing armor and standing 2 to 3 feet taller than most people now, can you?" "I suppose not," she said with a smile. "Be gone, then, Gorzilla," laughed Atkinson. "To think your father tried to kill her," said Dewhurst as Sarah departed. "As did I. It's a good job you sired strong offspring, Dewhurst. A good job indeed, smiled Atkinson. Sarah arrived back at the pathology lab just as Burke and Hare were delivering the 3 police officers, closely followed by Tom Harper. "Hello there, strange young thing. I have a good memory for faces, and I seem to know yours. Have we worked together before, perhaps?" "Hello, Tommy. What's happened here, then?" "I've had to go to the police station, as some deranged police officer has killed these poor individuals and injured 20 others. Do you know why I had to leave this wonderful place of solitude and go myself?" "Oh, I know this one. It's 'cause Gavin isn't here, isn't it?" "Well, it isn't because you were missing." "What have you done with him, you nasty girl?" "Nothing. He has a severe case of man flu." Yes, you are apparently wearing the poor man's immune system down." "I never touch his CD equipment. Only old people use them. I have an MP3 player." "Good for you! MP3 player indeed. Now put the kettle on and make some tea. With there only being 2 of us, you're going to have to do some work today." "And you too," shouted Tom. "Have a little respect for the dead when you bring 'em here." Burke and Hare just looked at him, showing absolutely no emotion as they left their deliveries and walked out. Talk about fitting the job you were doing. Those 2 are without doubt the strangest people I have ever met, said Tom. Looking at Sarah as she returned with the tea, he said, "I take that back." "You take what back, Tommy?" "Never mind." The day went by quickly. Just as the clock was chiming 8, Linda Harper's front door bell rang. She hesitated a moment, thinking, "What are you doing?" But then the thought of how a superintendent dresses when she is off duty kicked in, so she ran to the door. As she opened it, she couldn't believe her eyes. The most senior officer that had ever spoken to her was standing in front of her, wearing a long black dress with stiletto-heeled shoes. Her hair was down and over her shoulders, and she was wearing makeup. She was not what Linda had expected at all. "Do you approve?" asked Victoria Mallock, doing a little twirl on the steps. I'm... Wow! Please, come in. Where are my manners? You look beautiful. As do you, Linda. I look... Please, sit down. I'll only be a couple of minutes, said Linda, as she ran back up the stairs. Victoria sat down in the living room, wondering what was wrong. Her dinner guest looked like she was ready, dressed sedately, but ready. A few minutes passed, and Linda Harper returned to the living room. This time the word sedate was forgotten. She was wearing a long black skirt with black mesh over the fabric, a pair of stiletto-heeled New Rock boots, and a black mesh, slightly see-through top that was figure-hugging, showing a glimpse of a leopard skin-patterned bra. She, too, had let her hair down, and it fell just onto her shoulders. "Linda, just look at you. You're gorgeous, Victoria exclaimed. You approve, then? I love it. I wish I'd have put my new rocks on now. I can't believe we like the same clothing. Where do you shop? Queried Linda. Wednesday's Wardrobe, in the Marion Center. Me too, but I've never seen you in there before. Would you have recognized me? Because I certainly wouldn't have recognized you, said Victoria. I suppose not. I do love that shop, Linda enthused. I know Wednesday. She is a friend of mine. I will introduce you properly to her, if you would like, said Victoria. That'd be great. I would love to look like her. She has a particular style that most can't pull off. I'm so glad that you and I share the same style of dress. I love it, especially the splash of leopard skin. Linda smiled and said, There may be more than just a splash. Victoria smiled and said, I'd better make sure this night goes well, then, hadn't I? Because, as I've already mentioned, I do so love leopard skin. At the offices of Atkinson, Dewhurst, and Smith, Tamara gave John Smith his list. He glanced through it and said, It's an odd job that I do. It isn't the usual 9 to 5, but it has perks and much better long-term prospects than any other job. Speaking of the perks, what news of Tom Harper? Answered Tamara. We have a lot in common. I say a lot, 'cause we both work with death, and apparently we're both gay. What more do you need? Sounds like a perfect match. There will be more to it than that, though, John. There's the physical aspect as well. I know. The problem with that is I think Tom is as inexperienced as I in that department. Oh, dear. 2 virgins in bed is 1 virgin too many, she advised. You've been with both men and women. Do you have to be any different when it is the same sex? Without the obvious biology lesson, John, it is not quite the same for 2 girls, but I understand your question. If there is a sexual attraction between you both, with you both being consenting adults, then sex will happen. Although a lot of people don't agree, it is quite acceptable. Why it never was is beyond me. So just go with the flow, then? Yes, John, if it feels right, she assured. John Smith took the scroll of doomed names and entered the realm of death. As the office door closed behind him, he felt the reassuring comfort of the realm that belonged to him alone. He perused his list. The cords waiting to be severed in his realm began to appear in front of him. To his left, cords with dead ends. To his right, cords with new beginnings, all waiting in line. The cords awaiting fulfillment. These were the mortal cords that appeared in the realm of death upon the conception of a child. He took hold of the first cord from the left, and with no emotion whatsoever, ended the life of a doctor on the plane of existence with a cut of his great sword. Sheathing the sword whilst holding the part of the cord that was still in his realm, He let the severed end wend its way back to the deceased medic. He then took the cord and added it to one on the right, placing them together. As soon as the two ends met, a flash of light fused the cords together, and the doctor was born again. John Smith carried on this task with gusto, wielding that great sword as only the reaper can. Back at the office, Tamara left for the evening, saying good night to the ever-efficient Mr. Braithwaite. Her first stop was the pathology lab. "Hello, it's quiet in here," observed Tamara. "Isn't it wonderful? I was just about to put on some Mozart. I only have brief moments when culture can prevail in here," said Tom. "Tamara!" screamed Slab Girl as she burst through the door. Alas, that particular avenue of pleasure eludes me once more. Now, how can I be of assistance? "It is a personal matter," said Tamara. "Come to the office. We can use that while Mr. Jackson is away." "Ah, yes, poor Gavin, down with the flu," said Tamara. "Yeah, so it would seem. Excuse me one moment while I give the, for want of a better word, student something to amuse itself with whilst we chat." Tamara laughed as she watched Sarah giving poor Tom a hard time. She wished she had a different personality to fall back on now and then. Tom returned, smiling. That should keep the gruesome minx happy for a while. Now, how can I help? Tamara laughed again and said, "Gruesome minx? Yes, she is. She loves this job." "Is she good at her job?" I wouldn't change her for the world. Working with Sarah is like being a bomb disposal operative. You have to treat the thing with kid gloves, or it will blow. You make her sound like a monster. Oh, absolutely. She is the strangest person I have ever worked with at this place. She is untidy. Her dress sense is deplorable. Her intelligence debatable. Although her devotion to her husband is second to none. She is a lovely person who wouldn't hurt a fly. A strange contradiction. Now, enough about Gorezilla. You haven't come here to give me the counseling I so desperately need because of her, have you?" Again Tamara laughed, especially about the "she couldn't hurt a fly" part. She was quite sure Atkinson would disagree with that one. At this point, Sarah made her usual backward bum door-opening maneuver. This time, the door handle caught the bottom of her miniskirt, pulling it upwards as she came through the doorway. "If I have told you once, I've said 1,000 times, put your white coat on." Sarah had now turned around, with her skirt pulled up to her waist, revealing her white knickers with moshi monsters on the front. "Sarah, it is a good job our mother can't see you now," said Tamara, with a slight grin on her face. Sarah just giggled, trying to unhook herself from the door handle. "Our mother?" echoed Tom. "Yes, we are sisters. I thought you knew." "I had no idea," said Tom. Standing up and walking to Sarah, he took the tray of tea she was delivering, and then Sarah was able to free herself. "Your sister and I have things to discuss. There's blood on that table I've been using. Need I say more?" Another flash of her underwear ensued, as she twisted at speed, running to the waiting table. Tamara just shook her head and laughed. "So, sister of Swamp Thing, how do you like your tea? Just like my men, strong with a hint of sweetness." Tom smiled as he handed her the bone china cup and saucer, used only for special guests. "So, here we are. I presume this has something to do with Mr. Smith?" "Indeed it has. Can we speak plainly, Mr. Harper?" "Of course we can, but please call me Tom." "Okay, Tom. You need to be careful in regards to John. He is not like any other man you may have met." "In my line of business, the only men I have ever met are dead. It may be hard for you to understand, but believe me, when your work is death, you have very few friends. I was quite surprised when an accountant wanted to spend time with me." Quite. But that isn't what I mean. John Smith is a complicated man and may seem odd at times, especially if someone angers him. "Oh, believe me, I know. I've seen him in action." "What do you mean?" said Tamara. "The first time we were out, a group of lawless thugs came into the pub where we were, and one of them picked on John. Within seconds, the whole lot of them were unconscious." "I see. So you're not disturbed by that sort of thing?" queried Tamara. "Contrary to popular beliefs, we do not all wear pink underwear and slap each other with our handbags. We are men, fueled by testosterone, so no, it didn't disturb me at all. In that case, I can be a happy little secretary. There is one more thing I need you to be aware of, and that is, he has never done anything like this before, with a man or a woman. And we'd better both be careful, because neither have I." I can be at ease now. "Oh, yes. Here's a couple of tickets to the opera for tomorrow night. I want you both to have fun, because he is going to be very busy after that for a while," offered Tamara. "Thank you so very much. I tried to buy tickets for this opera, but it had been sold out for months," enthused Tom. "Yes, they are hard to acquire. That's where a good secretary comes into her own. I'm sure John and yourself will enjoy the evening, because apart from those being the best seats in the house, they also offer you access to all areas. So if you want to chat backstage with the artist afterwards, you can," said Tamara, as she stood up and left the office. She kissed her sister on the cheek that didn't have blood swiped across it, and left. Under Crown Point Bridge, some people had gathered. These were low-life individuals drawn inexorably to that spot. They all just milled about, wondering what was going on. Some started fighting amongst themselves. When this happened, Crawshaw jumped down from his girder into the middle of the scrum. With one swipe of his arm, 12 bodies floated downstream. A circle opened up around Crawshaw as he looked upon this ragbag army of misfits. "Do as I say, and you will live. Displease me, and you will follow the shit that has just floated down the river," said Crawshaw. Everybody moved aside as he strode through them, with more and more joining the ranks as he climbed back into the girders. "I need sleep. See to it that I don't get disturbed." The small army moved into position under the bridge, lining both sides and the pathways along the bridge's top. As more people arrived, it wasn't long before the road spanning the river was blocked, alerting the police to the situation. There was no response from Park Road Police Station, as it was out of action, so police officers came from several other stations close at hand. On arriving, the sight that greeted the police officers was unprecedented. Hundreds of people had totally blocked the road, and they were unresponsive to the requests of the police. More and more were arriving, some of them very well known to the law. The officer in charge quickly radioed in with the news that the situation was totally out of their control. Only an hour before, this road had been clear. He also instructed Police HQ that there had been fatalities, as bodies could be seen floating down the river. An air of pure hatred loomed over the place as the police tried to drive back the gathered crowd. Anguished faces stared out from the assembled mass, zombie fashion. They began to sit down, and from the middle of the bridge, where the crowd was at its fullest, the people began mumbling some incoherent words. The whole situation was becoming frightening. Suddenly, the muttering stopped, and a deathly silence filled the air. The police drew back both ways from the bridge to wait for reinforcements from the army. A police helicopter flew overhead. The pilot and officer could not believe the sight underneath them. They also broke the news that the crowd stretched both west and east along the river on both sides. Crawshaw was protected to the max as he slept in the Victorian girders of the bridge. Away from the crowd at the river, in the north end of the town center, two ladies were enjoying each other's company. Victoria Mallock was talking about clothes, clubs, and bands. In fact, she was talking about anything other than police work. Linda Harper was mesmerized by the woman in front of her. She brought her hand up to the table and tentatively placed it over her companion's. Victoria turned her hand around and took hold. Both ladies smiled at each other, and in that tender moment, the tension of the first meeting vanished. Victoria lifted up her other hand, and Linda took hold of that too. "You are a stunning girl," murmured Victoria. "You are beautiful," answered Linda. "What now?" she continued. You mentioned earlier about there being more leopard skin on your person, quipped Victoria, raising an eyebrow. I didn't I? Answered Linda. Well, we should go. I don't think it would be appropriate to show you here, she continued. Victoria Mallock paid the bill and took hold of Linda Harper's hand once more, and the two of them left the restaurant. As they arrived at Linda's apartment, the lower-ranked police officer asked, "Would you like a glass of wine?" That would be lovely, accepted Victoria, as she looked around the small but very well-kept living room/kitchen. Linda returned with a bottle of nondescript white wine and two long-stemmed glasses, handing one of them to Victoria as they both sat down. After she had unscrewed the top off the bottle, she poured the wine very elegantly into Victoria's glass. She then poured her own and put the bottle down. An awkward silence filled the next few seconds, broken by Victoria. "So, your brother is the local pathologist. He never told me that." "Yeah, he never talks about his work. He learned his trade, so to speak, and qualified under Dr. Grayson. After Grayson retired, he then began working with a rather brilliant young doctor called Gavin Jackson," interrupted Victoria. "Yes, he totally admires Dr. Jackson's skills and methods and his understanding. I have never personally met him, but I do remember Chief Inspector Thompson took a while to adapt to the change after Dr. Grayson retired." This small talk carried on for the next hour until it dried up. To prevent another awkward silence, Linda said, "It's getting late. Do you want to stay?" "It's totally up to you. I'm not—" Victoria placed her forefinger on Linda's lips and said, "As a police officer, you wouldn't want to encourage me to drink and drive, would you?" Linda smiled and stood up, reaching out. She grasped Victoria's hands, helping her to her feet. As they walked out of the living room, Linda flicked the light switch to its off position and looked forward to the night ahead, a thought shared by the new person in her life. The next day arrived, and Tamara was already up and dressed. Her choice of clothing that particular morning was most definitely casual. She was meeting Atkinson to take part in her second favorite sport, clothes shopping. Atkinson was already at the meeting place, a small cafe in the middle of town. Like always, whilst he was in administration, he used public transport to get around, and not teleportation. For times of pleasure, he encouraged his staff to use that mode of transportation as well. Tamara's taxi pulled up outside the arranged meeting place. She alighted and made her way inside. As she approached Atkinson's table, her favorite beverage was waiting for her. "Good morning, Tamara," said Atkinson. "A little late, my beautiful one?" he continued. "Yes, there is a disturbance on one of the bridges across the river. It is causing all kinds of delays with traffic." "Which bridge?" "The old one, By the Royal Armories, she said. I think we will go there. I want to deliver a message to someone. But I thought we were going shopping, said Tamara, sporting a tremendous pout. This is business, Tamara. See you at the south end of the bridge. As she finished her beverage, Tamara noticed a lovely lady watching her from a nearby table. On her way out, she placed her hand upon the woman's own, smiled, and gave her a business card. As she walked away, the young woman, who was having a wonderful day, looked over the card, quickly placed it in her bag, and hoped their paths would cross again. With that, Atkinson and Tamara left the cafe, pulled their hoods over their heads, and disappeared, reappearing at the south entrance to the bridge. Upon their arrival, the entire crowd looked gaunt, and anger spewed from them. Atkinson looked at Tamara as he observed that any police presence had gone, and there were no helicopters taking photographs. He put that down to the crashed police helicopter's tail sticking out of the river. As the crowd of what could only be described as zombies began to shuffle towards him, he lifted both arms up to shoulder level, his palms touching each other, then quickly separated his hands outwards. The effect was reminiscent of the parting of the waves, as the entire crowd was ejected over both sides of the bridge, instantly clearing it. He jumped over the side and looked up at the girders, saying, "Don't use humans. As you can see, they offer no defense against me." Knowing Mother Nature wasn't ready yet, and neither was he turned and walked away. Crawshaw stared from his vantage point and growled. The river was full of dead bodies, his entire army slain. Carcasses were caught in the weir, in the locks of the canal, and floating downstream. As the police, bolstered by the army, finally arrived back, it was quickly realized that a mass suicide had taken place in some kind of cult event. The whole area was cordoned off. 10 minutes later, Atkinson and Tamara arrived at Wednesday's wardrobe to peruse new items to add to their own extensive ones. Linda Harper's tranquil moment watching Victoria Mallock as she slept was taken away by her new lover's phone ringing. Victoria opened her eyes and took a moment to realize where she was, but instinctively answered the phone. She glanced at Linda and then suddenly remembered everything as she answered the phone. She gazed at her beautiful new friend and then leaned over to kiss her, saying, "I have to go, Linda. When are you at work?" "Today and tomorrow are my days off this week," she answered. "Can we meet up tonight?" "I would love that," nodded Linda, as she watched Victoria dress. Once fully clothed, the detective superintendent leaned back down to kiss Police Officer Linda Harper on her lips, and then left the bedroom. Arriving at the bridge incident, Victoria Mallock quickly took charge and began to assess the situation. Talking with one of her junior officers, he relayed to her the facts of what had happened. "You're telling me all these people just committed suicide? How come there are no survivors? Isn't that a little unusual for a suicide cult? Also, why do it in the glare of publicity? I think we'd better look into this a good deal further before we talk about mass suicide," said Detective Superintendent Malik. "The bystanders are not much use at the moment." "How so?" inquired Malik. "It is as if they've all been briefed to say the same thing. Or they are all telling the truth." "Well, ma'am, with respect, I don't think they are." "Why?" "Again, with respect, they are all saying they were drawn here against their will. Most of them who say they saw what happened said a man and a woman arrived at the bridge. The man held up his arms, then parted them, and as he did so, the people started jumping from the middle of the bridge, or were somehow thrown over the side walls, landing in the river, one on top of the other. The couple then just disappeared. Also, most of these people are known to us. They are petty criminals and, in my opinion, liars, ma'am." "What about that downed helicopter over there?" "Again, ma'am, from our viewpoint, all we could see was it coming down. They must have had a weapon of some kind." "Good grief, Detective Sergeant! We have hundreds of bodies floating in the river. A police helicopter crash, presumably killing its occupants, and people milling about, all saying the same outrageous thing. I need answers, and I need them fast. I want to know what's going on here. Has anyone checked the CCTV for the bridge? If not, why not? Please make that your first job." "I'll get someone straight on it, ma'am." "No, you do it. I want answers by lunchtime," demanded Malik. As she moved to the side of the bridge and looked over, she saw a man walking away from the area, obviously a vagrant by his appearance. When she glanced again at where he had been, he had vanished, it seemed, into thin air. She said out loud, "I thought I saw someone I knew." As the vagrant made his escape, he knew that the police had far more to deal with than a missing person and a chief inspector with a bad attitude. However, Crawshaw underestimated the tenacity of Chief Superintendent Victoria Malik.